Hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining me for another video. Today we have something a little different. It's not so much of a tutorial, but I have a little news. I am now acting as an ambassador for Viviva Colors, and they have given me 3 of their products to try out, so I thought I would go through them with you. I'll be doing a few projects using their products over the next few months, but I just wanted to go over quickly what they have sent me here. And just to show you one product in particular for this first video, we're going to be going over the color sheets. You may have seen those from other YouTube videos or on Instagram. They have also sent me their watercolor pans and a travel paint kit. The travel paint kit I think is perfect for this time of year, so we're going to get into that one in the next video. So we'll just put that aside for now. And the Viviva color pans are a little different than their Viviva color sheets, because these are actually pigment-based paints as opposed to the color sheets, which are dye-based. Now, a little bit about the company. The company started with these Viviva color sheets by a young man who was in medical school and lost his kind of not so much his love, but found he didn't have a lot of time for creative endeavors and wanted something that was really kind of portable and could be, you know, pulled out anywhere and he could start to paint and get some creativity out. So that's why he came up with these color sheets. So we're going to get into this, this one for today. So I'll put these aside. And basically, these are made in India, and they are watercolors in a little booklet. So we'll just go through the unboxing here. And what you get is this little book of watercolor sheets. And I'll quickly go through what they're all about. They are highly pigmented because they are dye-based. They are vegan. Their entire company is eco-friendly. All the products are eco-friendly, and these are actually handmade in India, and they have a distribution company in the US, so they are very readily available. So the idea of it is that you can take these color sheets, which have the highly pigmented dye watercolors on each sheet, and you can take them with a brush and water or a water brush and basically paint anywhere because they're very travel friendly. You get this cute little sleeve on there with a little hello from the person that made some of the colors. And if you look at the sheet, I've already swatched these on these little areas where you're supposed to swatch them, and I've done a gradation because that's very handy. I like to see the tonal value of highly pigmentation to a light wash. So that's what I've done throughout. I've already kind of snuck in here and done that, but we're going to be swatching them on a bigger swatch sheet so you can get a better idea. And when you get this, definitely do at least this swatch here, because when you go through, you can see some of these colors that don't look like what you will actually get when you wet your sheet. Take a look at this one, for example. It's kind of almost got a metallic color on it, and very purpley, but when it comes out, it's peacock blue. So don't let these colors fool you. There is also a guide to the color on these little tabs here. But again, that's not very true to color. Swatching them is really best. So once you wet these, to avoid color transferring to the other sheet, they have a little glycine sheet in between each color. So if this is not dry and you want to flip to another color, you don't have to worry about that. They won't get transferred to the other colors because of this protective sheet. I also wanted to point out that you can order these color sheets individually. So if you just run out of 1 or 2, you can just order them. You don't need to order an entirely new book. And in the back, you'll see, now this has changed from previous color sheets that they had. They used to have a little sheet that you stuck to the back, and it was coated and you could use it as a palette. So instead they've actually recut the die shape of the back page. So what you do is you just fold that out, and you can use that as a little kind of mixing palette. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind is that these are dye based, okay? So you have to be careful. If your hands are wet, you will get it on your hands, and it's not easy to get off because it is dye. Now, this is going to be interesting for me because I've never worked with dye-based pigments before, so this will be kind of fun for me to give a try. I'm going to swatch them on a bigger sheet for you, and if time permits in this video, maybe I'll do just, not a painting, but maybe we'll just do a couple of quick little flowers or something. So what I've done here is I've got a sheet of cold pressed paper, and I've put down the 4 pages here like this, and I've just done them in the order that they are in my book, like so. And I've made this sheet the size, well, not the sheet, I've made this little area the size of the booklet. So I'm going to cut this out when I'm done and just kind of tuck it in the very back so I have it handy to take with me, because I just want to see them all at once rather than flipping through the book to look at the swatches. So let's just jump in and swatch them, and we'll see what we have. My brush isn't too wet. I don't want to go crazy because these are so highly pigmented, and I'm just going to put heavy pigment to the left, put my brush in the water, and then just drag this out to get a nice wash. And that way we have a really good idea of what these colors can do for us. Okay, so there's your crimson. Now, because these are dye-based, they're going to be very transparent, so I'm not worried about, you know, drawing a line and testing the opacity. I'm just going to put my hand there. So now we'll do the deep pink. I really like that carmine. It's a nice, bright, clear red. This deep pink is highly pigmented. I'm going to take all the color off my brush and drag this down to see really what the pink is like by the time we get to that light wash. Because I know these colors are going to give us really vibrant shades, but I also want to be able to use them for light washes too. So I really want to see what that's going to give us. So now we're going to do the vermilion. You get a lot of reds here, which is nice because reds can be kind of fussy. You know, you've got one that's way too orange, one that's way too yellow, but this gives you a nice variety. So there's our vermilion. Now dusk orange. This one I really like because I don't have a nice bright clean orange in my watercolor palette, so it will be nice to have this to get some nice vivid oranges. I'm imagining this will turn fairly yellow by the time we get to a pale wash. Yeah. So that does turn into a nice yellow. Now we're going to flip this sheet over, and we've got chrome yellow. And you need very little, okay? I can't express that enough because they are highly pigmented. Now each sheet, or each square of color is equal to a half pan, okay? So you get a lot of color for just a simple little booklet that you can take with you. That's a nice yellow. Now we've got yellow ochre. This will be interesting to see how this turns out because I do use yellow ochre a lot, and it's quite brown, a lot darker than my watercolor yellow ochre, but again, it's because they're so highly pigmented, and I might be laying down a little too much, but I really do want to see. I'm going to tip this one a bit because I want this one to kind of run down because it is so highly pigmented. So I want to take it right down to that wash because yellow ochre usually turns quite yellow by the end, and yes, this one does as well. Maybe I'll just tap a little bit more in here just to get more of a gradation, like so. Now we're on to burnt umber, which is a really good color to have. So I'm glad this is included. Again, quite dark. I'm trying to stay off my color names there. They seem to bleed well as well. Again, this is another one I'm going to tip and kind of draw down. Maybe put just a titch more here. There we go. And let this one just kind of flow. So I want to get it down to that light wash. I want to make sure they've got the versatility to go from highly pigmented to a nice light wash. So we want to make sure we show that on our swatch sheet. And I'm really glad I'm doing this swatch sheet because it will definitely be handier than flipping through this little book to see every color. Now we've got burnt sienna, which is a color I use quite often. This one doesn't seem to be quite as highly pigmented as the rest. Maybe I'm just expecting more density out of it, but it goes quite orange. So that's good to know. I may just tap in a little bit more. So they do act a little differently than a watercolor. But I like it because they're nice and transparent. And some watercolors, even though they're listed as transparent, they're not as transparent as what you're going to get out of a dye. And I'll show you actually why at the end. You'll be able to see it in my water jar. Okay, so we're halfway there. Now we get into the greens. And they've got this light green, which is quite a nice green. It's gets to the point where it's almost neon. It's so bright. Once you get it down to that wash, you'll see what I mean in just a minute. See how that all that yellow's coming out and how it's almost like a neon green. I'm going to tap a little bit more in there and have that run down as well. Okay, so you get a nice variation with this one. Just a little bit more in there. So if you do want to give these a try, like I say, I highly recommend doing a full swatch sheet like this. And it doesn't have to be that big. You see, I've made mine the size of the color sheet booklet, so you don't need to do a huge swatch sheet. Now this is their sap green. I found the sap green kind of interesting because I use it all the time in my watercolors. And what I like about this sap green is that it turns almost olive color. You do get that sap green tone. By the time you pull it out though, It's got almost that olive shade in it. And I use my olive green in my watercolor palette all the time. And one of my favorite greens is actually a mixture of sap green and olive green. So I really like this green. It's going to be really, really versatile. Now we'll move on to Viridian. You can see how vibrant these are. I think they're going to be a lot of fun to play around with. Now we've got the Viridian, and you'll see, again, see how that color is almost like a brownish color? And I'm hoping you can pick up this almost metallic tone there. I'm assuming that has something to do with just the small amount of binders they need to put in to get them on the sheet. Kind of that's how it reacts with the dyes. So like I say, you can't just flip through these and look at the colors and think that's what you're going to get. So swatching is very important. So the Viridian green, and I love Viridian green. See how it's so highly pigmented? It's almost black towards the end. I have to kind of remember that and not go crazy with picking up color. You need very little. So that is a good example of why the sheets will last you a decent amount of time with your paintings. Yeah, this one's really highly pigmented, so we'll try to get this out to a nice light wash, like so. Now we'll do the peacock blue. I've never had a peacock blue, so I'm quite pleased to get this one too. Again, this one is really highly pigmented. It looks like it's going to be really pretty though. Yeah, that's quite nice. It's almost like a really bright cerulean blue. Just take this out to a light wash. See, I plunked a little too much water in there, and it does kind of bloom like a watercolor would bloom. So this is new to me, like I say, because I've never used dye-based watercolor before. So it will take a little bit of getting used to for me. But I'm really happy with the colors. They're just so vibrant. You know, if you've watched some of my videos, that I have a tendency to overdo it with the color, just because they're so pretty. And I think I'm going to have to be careful with these because the colors are so fun and bright that I'm just going to want to be painting everything bright. This is nice and rich. So this is the Persian blue, and I'm assuming this is similar to like a Prussian blue, kind of close to a Prussian blue. So now we're going to go on to the violet. That's a nice bright purple. I like that. We'll take that right out to a wash. Yeah, that's pretty. This is another one that I'm going to kind of tip down so I get a better variation showing here. There we go. And we're down to our last two. And we've got the magenta. This is another one of those interesting ones which doesn't look at all like the color when it's on the sheet. It's pretty much brown, but look how nice that is. I'm just going to grab a little bit more of this one. And you can see how very little I'm using on this sheet, and I'm still not down to the paper in that corner. Again, I'm going to tip this one too. Maybe get a little bit more. Just tap it in here. This one looks like it's a little more tenacious than the rest, not flowing down quite as easily as the others. So I'll have to keep that in mind. Okay, but it's a nice clean pink. And now I'm really glad they added a black. So we have slate black. There's no gray, but you can get your grays out of this black, and you can warm them up by mixing them with other colors, or make it a little cooler, like a Payne's gray, by adding just a little bit of one of these blues, maybe the peacock blue. But it's nice that they've included a black. Actually, it's a nice neutral gray. It almost looks like my neutral tint when you pull it down to a wash. It's not as harsh as a black, which I'm quite happy with. Yeah, it's very close to my neutral tint when you pull it out. Just going to pull this one down just a little bit more. And there you go. I can't believe how vivid these are. It's crazy. But I think they're going to be a lot of fun to play with. So let's just see. Oh, this is what I wanted to show you. You can see how transparent my water still is. It's not like watercolor because it's dye. You don't get the kind of sludginess in there, which means if you're using a small jar of water while you're, traveling or sitting outside and using these just for convenience sake, you're not going to have to worry about really muddying your water up too much, because you can see there's no sludge in there because they're dye based. So that's another plus about using these when you're out and about. You will not have to be changing your water so much. Be a lot easier to use with a water brush. So I'm going to grab a slightly larger brush. I've got a size 6 around here because I'm just going to do a few quick little things on a small sheet for you. And we'll see how these perform. I'm just going to put my swatch sheet up there so I have it in front of me for reference. And let's just see. Let's just try a couple things first. Let's see how they bleed. Okay, so I'm just going to put some water down. I'm not going to do like a major painting or a scene here or anything. I just want to see how these work, how they bleed, maybe how they bleed into each other, how they blend. So let's take that chrome yellow, which is on my second sheet here. So we'll take some chrome yellow and we'll just tap it into this wet area that I just created, and we'll fan it out, drag it out. Okay, then I'm going to rinse my brush off, and I think I'll go into the deep pink, which is here, and let's just see how this reacts. So it bleeds quite quickly, as I expected it to. Then I'm going to rinse my brush off, tap it off on my paper towel, and just kind of drag it out and see how it blends. Blends quite nicely. So another thing I want to try is blending from color to color. So I'm going to take that deep pink again, and I'm going to put some here, and I'm going to drag it out, and we're going to blend that with the blue. So I'm going to go into the Persian Blue, which is on my last sheet, and we'll put some of that over here. That might be overkill because it is so pigmented, but we'll drag this out. Rinse my brush off, drag this out. See if we can get that kind of purple towards the middle. Okay, so I'm just dragging these colors into the other just to get that blend. Okay, so you've got some blends there. Now I'm imagining that lifting isn't going to be exceptionally easy. I'm using a cotton paper here, by the way. So I'm going to take this violet. Because these are dye-based, and maybe I'm wrong, because I've never worked with dye-based paints before, as I said, but I'm thinking that lifting is going to be a little more difficult than with a standard pigment-based watercolor. So we'll see. I'm just going to let that sit for a minute. You know what? I'm going to try to lift it while it's wet, actually. See what that does. So we'll lift, tap it off my paper towel. Yeah, that's what I thought. And maybe if you have more experience with dye-based paints or pigments, you can let me know, but I was fully expecting that it wouldn't be so easy to lift. Maybe on a non-cellulose paper it would be. And I can let that dry and see if we can reactivate it and do some more lifting to see how that goes. But I kind of want to just do a little flower, and I'm going to use this palette sheet at the back. It's coated, okay, so it's not going to absorb. And I want to mix kind of a burgundy color, okay? So let's see if we can get that out of the magenta. That's too much water. So we'll put some magenta down here. And I'll go into the slate black. I'm just going to put some down there. I don't want to mix them together yet because I'm not sure how this is going to go, but let's see. So that's a little purpley for me. So I want to add in a little bit of, I think, orange to knock this down a bit, maybe some burnt sienna. See if I can get this kind of antique-y pink that I want. That's a little brown. A little more magenta. Yeah, so that's a nice kind of antique-y kind of pink. And let's just do a quick little flower. So what I would normally do is maybe put a few little dots down, rinse my brush off, pull this out to get some petals. And because this is dye-based, it does sink into the paper quite quickly, which is what I was expecting. So it is a little different than working with watercolors. And I'm just going to go in and get a little more pigment. Tap it in. Maybe I'll tap in some, you know what, I'm just going to deepen this up a little bit. Get this a little more pigmented for a deeper value. Like so. And just tap this towards the center. So it's bleeding as I would expect, which is nice. Let's get some leaves on this. So I'm going to go to the sap green, and I'm not going to mix it with anything because I really like that color. Okay, so I'm just going to put a bunch of it here. Then I'm going to dip my brush in my water. I should probably be switching to a little bit of a smaller brush, but another leaf down here. I quite like that. I like the way this is performing, actually. I'm going to switch to my size 2 brush because this is such a tiny little painting. And I'm going to go right into back to the magenta. Put that on here. And let's just tap a nice hit of some dark, deep magenta here. And another thing I want to try is like a little bit of, I splattered there. That's not ideal. Oh well. I'm going to dry my brush off and see what dry brushing kind of does. I just want to drag some of this out. Now, because it doesn't sit on the paper as long, it's a little tougher to kind of drag that out, but it is working. I really like the softness of the bleeds. I'm going to go into my burnt umber. Which is here. I'm sticking to my smaller brush. Whoops. Sticking to my smaller brush. And I find it's, this sheet is really handy because you don't want to just dip into this and go right onto your paper because you don't know how much pigment you've got on your brush. By tapping it here, it just gives you a little bit more insight as to what's on your brush and gives you a little bit more control. So let's just tap in a center here. And I'm actually happy it's staying wet a decent amount of time. Like I mentioned before, this is a cotton paper, so it'd be interesting to see how it behaves on a cellulose paper. And let's just do some little blue flowers. So I really like that peacock blue. So let's go to that. Oh, and the other thing is, if you want to, whoops, go into a whole other color palette. Just wet this, take your paper towel and just wipe it clean. Just like that. Easy peasy. So I just decided to try a few other things on this demo sheet, but I just wanted to speed things up to keep the video to a decent size. I just wanted to try some of these bright blue flowers, just little kind of nondescript flowers, and I wanted to see what it would be like to kind of blend a different color in. So I'm adding the purple in there, just tapping it in the bottom, letting it bleed out a bit, coaxing it along with a damp brush, and then just painting in some fine little stems. I just wanted to give you an idea of you know, how they look with a few other ideas and color combinations. I also wanted to see what it would be like to lift that purple. So I reactivated it. It reactivated quite nicely, and I wanted to see if it left a hard edge when I dragged it out, and it didn't. It actually blended out quite smoothly. Now, again, I just want to reiterate that the lifting is difficult on this because they are dyes. So if you do a lot of lifting, keep that in mind, that you're not going to get that lifting performance out of a dye-based pigment. I also just did a glazing up in that upper left-hand corner. I took that bright blue and just glazed it over that yellow just to see how well it glazed, and it did quite well. It kind of feathered out quite nicely, and because they're dyes, they don't reactivate well, like I say, but the benefit of that is that it doesn't lift and reactivate the color beneath, so you get really nice results with the glazing. Here I'm just doing a lighter kind of version of a flower just to make sure that I could get those really light wash tones. The yellow, I believe I used the chrome yellow in that, and it is really vibrant, so be very, very light-handed if you just want to tap in, you know, a few yellow tones. I'm just deepening up the centers with some of that deeper red. I believe I didn't even see what it was on that sheet, I'm sorry, but anyway, it's a deeper red, and I'm just tapping it in the center and then just taking a damp brush and dragging that out, because that's what I do with my normal watercolors, and I wanted to see if I would be able to do that. So here I'm adding in a darker center, and I've mixed that burnt umber with a bit of the black just to make it more on a sepia side. It actually looked exactly like sepia, which was just perfect. So I tapped a little bit of that in the center. Now I'm just, you know, just kind of fancying it up a bit with a couple of leaves. And then I'm going back to my original flower, and I'm just taking that sap green and just doing another little layer just to accentuate some veining. So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this swatching and demo session of the Viviva Colorsheets. Be sure to tune in when I will be reviewing and demoing additional products, and be sure to check out their website to see what they have. And if you do want to purchase, don't forget to use my affiliate link, which will give you a 10% discount. It is in the description box below. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care, and I'll see you next time.